The Culture Pop Podcast is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob and Ronnie.
Accident or injury, call Jacob and Ronnie. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mace. If you or a loved one is injured in any kind of accident, please don't wait. Call Jacob immediately for a free consultation. That's right, free. When an accident happens, it can turn your world upside down, so put the best on your side. Jacob doesn't even get paid unless you win. First name, first thought, first call, Jacob, Jacob, Jacob. After an accident, 24 hours a day, call 844-24-JACOB or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Welcome to the world of Culture Pop with Steve Mason and Sue Kalinsky. Culture, comedy, movies, TV, tech, authors, trends, pop. This is the Culture Pop Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 31 of the Culture Pop Podcast. Steve Mason, Sue Kalinsky, really cool guest today. Sue, everybody watches Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is back, one of the funniest shows on TV.
It's hysterical. And
joining us today is Susie Essman, who plays Susie on Curb. Susie, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Do you remember doing our show in New York?
Very vaguely. It's like some vague, ethereal remembrance of mine, but I do remember something. I remember Sue much better than you, Steve, I have to say.
Totally understand. Well, she says she knows you for 30 years now.
It might be more.
Wow, maybe.
Yeah, I started doing stand-up in 1984.
Okay, I started in like 1980.
There you go. So I've known you since 1984.
Okay.
At least in passing.
So were you funny from the jump?
You mean on stage?
Yeah.
This is what usually happens. You have like an amazing first time you're ever on, and then it's downhill from there.
It's so true. It's so true.
And like you get on the first time, and you think you're like, oh my God, I'm really good at this, and then you learn that you suck, or that you have so much work ahead of you.
It's like being a golfer. I think I'm good. I think I got it. And then the next time I go out, I'm like the worst person in the world.
Right. And what you don't know is I remember like so many years ago, maybe 1985, Ronnie Shakes, the now departed, who was a wonderful comedian. You remember, so.
Sure.
I remember him saying to me, it takes 5 years for you to figure out who you are on stage. And I remember being cocky, thinking, well, it's not going to take me that long, Of course, it took me like 12 or 15. I still might not know. But it takes a really long time, not just to learn how to write a joke, but to figure out what your persona is and what you want to say and who you are and how you're different from everybody and, all that stuff. It takes years and years and years to figure it out.
So who was the first comedian that you saw, like even as a kid, that you said, oh my God, this is what I want to do, or I cannot believe how funny this person is?
Well, I never wanted to do it as a kid. It never occurred to me to do stand-up as a kid. I wanted to do Carol Burnett kind of stuff. She was a huge influence on me. I wanted to do, like, character-y sketch comedy. Stand-up, when I was a kid, you two were the same age, I think. Mm-hmm. We'd watch these comedians on Ed Sullivan, and Alan King would be talking about the airline food or whatever the hell he was talking about. And I thought it was funny, but I didn't connect to it in the sense of I could do that. It just seemed completely foreign to me. I didn't know anything about joke writing or anything like that. So there wasn't anybody except these female kind of sketch people. Lily, Carol Burnett really was the one that I watched, and I thought, I want to do that. Plus, they always looked like they were having so much fun.
Right. It's funny that
show,
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Alan King, because he was the first person that I remember seeing and really relating to him, because he talked about Long Island and being Jewish and
Right.
Your parents, and someone's always saying I'm hot, I'm cold, there's a draft, and it was like that was my
you
family.
All had the same parents. We all had the
Exactly,
same parents.
with different names.
But the first influence I had comedically, I would say, was in 1960 when I was 5 years old, and my parents bought the 2,000-Year-Old Man album. And I listened to that, and I used to stand up on the kitchen table and do the whole album, both parts, Mel and Carl. So that was the first album or comedy I remember made an impression on me and imitating. And then when I was a teenager, I used to, like, anytime Rickles was on Carson, my brother and I would just stay up to watch that. We just thought he was the funniest person that had ever existed. So those are the ones. Female comics, not really so much because there weren't any.
Right. Well, Toady Fields.
Not Joan Rivers, not Toady Fields.
And Phyllis Diller.
Well, there was those three, and that was about it. You know, I mean, there was Ann Mira, who I loved, but she was also in a sketch thing that wasn't stand-up. But I didn't really, I thought they were funny, but I didn't connect to them because they were, Phyllis, part of it was that I think they had to do this at that time. Phyllis had to dress up in those crazy outfits, and Joan had to be super self-deprecating, and Toady only talked about her being fat, and that didn't appeal to me. Mm-hmm. That self-deprecating stuff just really didn't appeal to me, and I think they were of their time. That I don't think audiences would necessarily have accepted them if they were not that, which is kind of a sad commentary, but I think that's true.
It's funny because I remember somebody, and it's probably the greatest compliment someone ever paid me at being a comedian, and not like a comedian, was that they said that a guy could do your act. And that really made me feel really special.
Well, because we came up in a different time, but we were still pioneers. Yeah. I think. Mm-hmm. There was just a handful of us, and I think that the visual started to change in the generation after us.
Are you still doing stand-up?
No. I mean, I'll still do privates and corporates and stuff like that because they pay me money and I'm not stupid. But clubs and theaters, no. I lost my... I don't have any... I have nothing to say anymore. It's not that I have nothing to say. I kind of feel like, it was so hard, and I did it for so long, and I figured it out, and I conquered it in a way. Not that you ever conquered it, but I got as good as I thought I was ever going to get, and I didn't feel the challenge of it anymore, and I didn't feel the desire to connect to an audience the way that I used to anymore. I used to love it, boy. I used to really love it.
Oh, I know. And for me, I feel like I've come full circle. Like, I remember being the funniest person in the office, and then I became a comedian, and then I stopped doing it, and now I'm the funniest person in the office, and people that didn't know that I did stand-up will say to me, oh, you should do stand-up. And
right, but like, you went back to it just in the last year.
Recently, within the last couple of years, I kind of went back on stage a little bit, and with mixed feelings, like you say.
It's hard.
Like you said to me how, in the beginning, like you have a great set, and then after that, they weren't as good, and that's what happened to me. My first time back, it was like I never stopped doing it, and I thought, well, how do I not do stand-up anymore?
How did I give it up?
And then I went back, and it just wasn't as much fun. So
yeah, part of it is I don't want to put age into it because there's a lot of comics our age who still do it and still do it brilliantly. But you kind of mellow in the. I don't feel like being in clubs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think the rules have changed?
Rules have absolutely changed. Absolutely changed. Joy and I were talking about this on The View yesterday. When we were doing comedy, it was this dark and dirty, down under club thing filled with smoke. We inhaled so much secondhand smoke. I'm sure we're all going to get emphysema at some point in our lives. But it was private. People didn't have phones. People weren't tweeting about what you were doing, and you could push the envelope, and you could go over the edge and then pull yourself back when you got that little feeling up your spine like, uh-oh, I shouldn't have said that.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I did it. But you were safe in a certain way, and it was private. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, totally. And also there weren't so many comedians either. It's like I knew everybody. Like if someone gave me a list of every comedy club in the country, I would have known the headliner always, and probably and maybe the middle act, but I would always know the headliner. And if I went to a party of like non-comic party, if it was a civilian party, I would have been the only comedian there,
Right, exactly. And we were very, it was community for us too. It's like, all those, like if I didn't have a boyfriend, who cared? I was working every Saturday night, and I would walk into a club and I would know every waiter and waitress and bartender and comedian, and it was very, very comfortable and a lot of fun in the 80s.
Right.
A lot of fun.
So these days you say one wrong thing and you get canceled. What do you think of this whole cancel culture thing?
I think it's killing comedy. I think people aren't free. I think it's one of the reasons why so many of the female comics that I see now are so filthy. It's because that's the only place they could go that's okay. That's politically correct for them, in a way. I think that so many of them have gone over the edge, but it's this political correctness that I think is killing comedy. You'd think somebody like Don Rickles, who I mentioned, he would never survive today.
No. Mm-hmm.
In a million years, he wouldn't survive today.
Right. And even someone like Bill Hicks may not survive today.
Right. However, Larry David, he gets away with it on Curb.
He does. I don't know how he gets away with some of the stuff he does.
He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He could care less if he offends anybody. And he's an equal opportunity offender.
How has it been 20 years since the debut of Curb? That is just crazy to me.
I know. Crazy to me too, because I was there.
So
yeah, I know.
I want to know, how did you find, like when you found out you got the gig, like how did that go down? Because I heard a story and I want to know if it's true.
Okay, so I was in my apartment one day. Remember that apartment I had on 78th Street,
yes.
right across from Stand Up New York?
Yes.
So I'm there and the phone rings and it says, we didn't have caller ID, It was Larry. And I hadn't heard from him. I lived in New York all those years. He moved to L.A. when he was doing Seinfeld. I hadn't heard from him in years. And we were always friendly, like hanging out at the bar friendly, where he would regale me with all his dating horror stories, which then became George storylines, And he was like, Susie, it's LD. And I was like, oh, hi. What do you want? And he was, I have this part I want you to play. It's Jeff Garland's wife in this new show I'm doing. I said, well, send me the script. There's no script. I said, well, what's the character? Don't worry about it. Whatever it is, you could do it. And I was like, okay. And he was like, there's no money. It's low budget. You have to fly yourself out and put yourself up. And I was like, I don't mind working for Day Scale, but I'm not going to have it cost me money, And then they came up with some money, and they flew me out, I think, coach, and put me up in some shithole, And that was that. But I didn't know. It's year to year for like many, many years. I never knew if the show was coming back or if I was in it. I was not a contract player until I think season 8, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
I know. I had no contract. I was just paid per episode. In the first 3 years, I made Day Scale. I made no money on that show. First 5 seasons, I made nothing. But I was happy to do it because it raised my price for my personals.
So what was the first episode like?
Cash in. First episode, season 1. I was in 3 episodes in season 1. And 2 of them were one was just kind of introducing Jeff's wife. It was nothing. And then the second episode I was in was this episode called The Wire, which Jeff has a fresh air fun kid come stay with us, and the kid robs us blind. And Larry's whole direction to me was, I could do language on this podcast, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Larry's direction to me was, I want you to rip Jeff a new asshole, okay? And I was like, well, I've been in relationships. I can do that, no problem. And I'm just screaming at him and yelling and fuck you and blah, 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 blah. And Larry keeps pulling me aside and says, go bigger, go bigger. And I thought I was going pretty big, more and more and more. And then finally he pulls me aside. He said, make fun of Jeff's fat. And I was like, well, I don't like to do that. I don't like to make fun of people's physical characteristics. I never did it on stage. It was always something that, I didn't like to do that at all. So just do it. He knows he just acted good. So that's the first time I called him a fat fuck. And then that was it. The genie was out of the bottle.
Oh, man.
But he saw me on the Jerry Stiller roast of Comedy Central, which is why he thought of me for that part. Because on roasts, as you know, especially in the old days, you had to be completely blue and filthy. That was what they were. And it wasn't necessarily what my act was, but I kind of, wrote like really punchy filthy stuff. Like, I remember Maury Povich was on the dais. I was like, Maury, everybody always wonders why you married Connie Chung. And then I realized we all know Jews love to eat Chinese, shit like that. So he saw that, and he had that episode in mind where he wanted Jeff's wife to be really filthy, cursing and like crazy. And that's why he gave me the part.
Has there ever...
But what was the story you heard, Sue?
Oh, no, it was the same thing, but I had heard that he said, when you asked what's the part, he said, it's you, you could do it.
Oh, yeah, no, he just said, don't worry, you could do it. I don't think he had anything really in mind, until I was there, and then it just kind of developed. We've never discussed the character, ever in all these years.
What's your favorite episode?
I have a lot of them, but I would say my ultimate favorite is probably from season 2, in which I was only in 2 episodes, by the way, the doll. Because that was the first of all, who doesn't love screaming, get me the fucking head? But that was the first time that I think Susie started to really establish herself and her power, that they lived in fear of her, Jeff and Larry, And that's the first time I had that spaghetti western music as my theme. And I think that episode started to really, we started to really figure out, even though we never discussed it, who she was and what her relationship to these two yutzes were.
I just have to say that, so Steve and I both watched the first episode of the new season. And before I had seen it, I was talking to Kathy Ladman, a mutual comedian friend.
Yes, of course.
Who's going to be on this season. Anyway.
She's on this season? I didn't remember that.
Yeah, she's going to be on this season.
I don't remember. Well, okay. I was probably not there that day.
Okay.
She was in another season where Larry ran into her on the street. That I remember.
Right,
Is she playing herself or a character?
I think she's playing a character.
Okay, well, we'll see, won't we?
Yeah.
Sue was in an episode.
Yeah, well, Susie...
I remember Sue played a lovely lesbian.
Yeah, and by the way, I thought that was Sue's coming out. I, after that, assumed that Sue was a lesbian, and later found out, no, she's married.
Actually...
No, she's just a really good actress.
Steve actually called me up and said, this is how I find out you're a lesbian?
And that was about Jodie Funkhauser,
That's right.
who was played by Mayim Bialik.
That's right. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. It was a fun day. So I was talking to Kathy, and I hadn't seen the episode yet, and I said, did you see it? And she said, oh, God, it's so funny. And she said, I'll just say one thing. Susie's outfits.
Well, that's, how that developed, because that was me, not Larry.
I was going to ask.
Sense.
Yes.
The first year we were in this house, we've had so many different houses, it's ridiculous. And it's always because of just circumstance, So the first year we had this house up in the Hollywood Hills, and we ended up moving from that house because it was really bad for the trucks, because you know what it's like up there. They couldn't park all the production and crew trucks there. So the house was decorated, and I just was looking at the way the house was decorated, and I just decided I had this idea of how she dressed, and it was like these Russian immigrant women in Brighton Beach in Brooklyn. And our wardrobe designer at the time, Wendy, I tried to explain it to her, and she was from the Midwest, and she had no idea what I was talking about. She was like, where can I get clothes like that? And I said, the back room of Loehmann's. So she had never heard of Loehmann's. So I took her on a field trip to Loehmann's, and she was just like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this, And then we just started playing with the wardrobe. And then when Christina Mangini came on as the wardrobe designer, she really went over the top. And there were certain things we would put. The fittings we would just laugh so hard at the fittings. And certain times I would walk out on set, and Larry would look at me and say, "Oh, you went too far. You look ridiculous. Stop. You look ridiculous." And I'd have to change. And now Leslie Schilling is our wardrobe designer, and this season she outdid herself.
Yeah, because you've got the Abraham Lincoln hat in the first episode, 7 years ago.
That was Larry's idea. That hat was Larry's idea.
Oh my God! And then that red cap. It's like.
Here's how things developed. Once he decided that he saw somebody, names will not be mentioned, at an awards show wearing that hat, and he texted me, "I want you to wear that this season." I was like, "Okay, fine." I have no shame about what I look like. So once I wore that hat, then Leslie and I decided that the theme we always have a theme that we don't tell anybody. It's just between us. The theme this season will be hats. So I have a lot of hats this season.
So, when
it's my favorite part. It's my favorite part of the character is putting on those outfits. And it's also, I'm not like a trained actress, but I guess I work from the outside in as opposed to inside out, because I put on the outfits and then I just become her. It's like easy for me. I just become her once I'm in the outfits.
Oh God, that's so funny. So we all know that the show is what would you say? Would you say it's softly scripted, or you
improvise? How would you describe it?
I remember when I auditioned, I got like a little it looked like a Chinese fortune, and they told me this is what the scene is, and basically that's what it was when I did the part. So how does it work?
There's a written outline.
Okay.
And the outline it used to be 7 pages. Now, for some reason, it's like, 150. The episodes have gotten, like that episode last Sunday night, the first episode, it was so dense.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. There was a lot going on.
Things happened in that episode. But they used to be a little looser. So about 7 to 10 pages, and there's a paragraph written approximately for what each scene happens in each scene. There's no dialogue written. The only time dialogue is written is when it's necessary for the scene. Like I might have to, like for example, if I had the Happy New Year was the first episode, if I had to at some point say Happy New Year because it was part of the storyline, that would be written. But nothing else would be written. It's all improvised. It's completely improvised. This year I was very lucky because I had a little special helper whispering funny lines in my ear, Miss Carol Leifer.
Great. Yeah.
And it was she was amazing to have there because, she could channel my character so easily.
Yes, totally. Oh, cool.
So she would just in between takes whisper little funny things in my ear, and then I would incorporate it. But yeah, we just do it. We just make it all up as we go along. But we know it's not this kind of free form. We know where we have to get to, and we know what we have to, what information we have to impart. And Larry's all story, which I always think that's the real genius of Larry David is his story brain.
So is Larry David really the Larry on TV? Sue, you would know too. Is he really the Larry on TV?
No.
He's the sweetest. He's the sweetest guy.
And yeah, he doesn't treat people that way. That character's so jerky and assholey. No, the real Larry is a very sensitive person to how he affects people, and he thinks those things. That's why, everybody thinks those things. That's why it resonates, I think, because he's just saying what everybody thinks but won't say, and that's what his character's doing. But in real life, he doesn't. He couldn't be our leader and have an entire cast and crew and be the head of the whole, and he was for Seinfeld also, if he acted that jerky.
Yeah, he's sweet and menschy. And I remember when I did the show, in between takes, he looked at me and he said, I think I used everybody. I think I used everybody from the improv. Oh, I think I did.
He's incredibly loyal.
Yes.
He's the most loyal person I know. He just, he gives friends jobs, and he's incredibly loyal and wonderful. And I loved him. I loved him second most male in the world.
So there's a daringness about that first episode that he's gonna follow this Me Too storyline, which seems, especially in this day and age, a little risky.
Well, it depends on how it's done. You'll see. The way he does it, I think, is really interesting. Really, really interesting.
How far?
And again, he pushes that envelope.
How far in advance do you know what the episodes are going to be?
I get all the outlines in the beginning of the season, but most people don't. He doesn't like anybody getting outlines. This season, I think he was looser about the outlines, but in the past 9 seasons, he's been very secretive about the outlines because he doesn't want anybody lying in bed the night before coming up with bad sitcom lines.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's exactly what he doesn't want. So what happened with you, Sue, is basically what happens. You show up on set, and he'll tell you, this is what you're going to do. It's going to be a scene where you approach me, and you say something about my bow tie and blah, 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 and this is where you want to get to. I assume that's how that happened with you, right?
Totally. And you know what was crazy is that in the audition, I called him Tucker Carlson. And then during the scene, there were some other people at the party who had,
I remember
had
it.
lines before me, and one of those guys improvised Tucker Carlson. I was like, oh my God, I can't use that line anymore. But it was fun.
But he doesn't want you coming up with those bad, those planned, some 8-year-old saying the wittiest thing ever kind of sitcom line, So most people don't get the outlines. For some reason, he's always given them to me.
How does
Which I like, because I like to, like, for example, if I'm doing a scene and the scene before my scene is somebody yelling and screaming at him, then I don't want my scene to be yelling and screaming at him. I might take it down and and completely insult him in a different way, because I like to see the rhythm of the whole show.
How does the show stay relevant for 2 decades?
Well, the first and most important thing is it's funny. Mm-hmm. It's really, really funny.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I think that, and I watched recently, we were watching some old ones. They're still just as funny as they were then. They might even be funnier now, seeing them the 5th time. So that's number one. Funny is funny, and there's no way around that. And then, he's very topical, Larry. So it just works. I mean, the first episode, he had the MAGA hat, he had the Harvey Weinstein, he had the Me Too. I mean, it's just really chock full.
Right, the birds and the selfie sticks. I mean, it was
the selfie, exactly. And that was just a throwaway.
Yes,
yep.
That was just a throwaway.
Right.
Mocha Joe's, the Spite Store. I mean, you're right. It is very densely packed.
Right. And if you look at old ones, they're a little looser. But that's Larry. His sense of story is, and you look at Seinfeld. It's just amazing how he understands story and what's funny and what's not. He was always the funniest. When we were doing stand-up years ago, and Sue, you remember this, we used to all go watch him because he was so funny, even though the audience didn't really get him. Mm-hmm. But the most fun thing was to watch him die.
Yes. Right. Well, I remember like, MCs, they had to stay close to the
he would
door.
Always say, I MC'd a lot at Catch, and that point where I would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Larry David," and then we'd walk. He'd walk past me as I was walking off, and he would always whisper in my ear, "Stay close," because he would have like a 15-20-minute spot. But and then the MC would go to the bathroom, go and have a drink at the bar. No, with him you had to stay in the room because you never knew when he was just going to look at the audience and say, "I don't think so," and walk off.
Well, I remember one particular night at Catch, he came on stage and he addressed the audience, and then he said, "Can I use the A2
form.
the A2 form?" And they didn't get it. They just didn't get it, and he walked off stage.
Yeah, I remember one night at Catch, late at night, he was doing some bit about a bungalow, maybe a bungalow colony. I don't remember exactly what it was. And a woman in the audience said, "What's a bungalow?" And that was it. He just stormed off.
Well, Susie,
he did very well for himself, by the way.
Yeah, it seemed to work out. Hey, we appreciate you doing this a lot. Thank you very much for coming on. Curb Your Enthusiasm, obviously, Sunday nights on HBO. Love the show, and you are, as always, hilarious on it.
Thank you so much, and my outfits. Talk to you soon.
Yes.
All right, Suze, love ya.
Bye, honey.
Bye.
Susie Essman, great guest.
Oh my God, she's so funny.
You really shined in that. This is your world.
Stand up.
Yeah, stand up. This is your world.
So you're saying my other interviews were pretty crappy?
No, I mean, I think you're always good, but I think you were especially good.
Well, I was in my element.
Yeah, you were.
And I know her really well too.
Right. I love to hear about your stand-up days. I saw you do stand-up a little bit when we lived in New York.
I got some great stories.
Yeah, I bet you do. You're one of the guys.
One of the guys, always.
Yeah.
It's a tomboy.
Give us one joke. One joke from your original stand-up act.
I will tell you one of the first jokes that I ever did when I was living out in L.A.
Okay.
I was saying that, you see these guys with the blonde hair, dark tan, white teeth. Mm-hmm. These guys look like negatives. That was one of my first jokes when I moved out here.
That killed.
It's never a good thing when you ask a comedian to tell a joke. So I was just,
you know what?
I shouldn't have bit.
That's why I did it.
Of course, because you're an asshole.
I did it. There is your Culture Pop podcast. Thank you very much, Sue. And we'll see you soon.
Goodbye.
Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next week for an all-new episode of Culture Pop.